Hey everyone, if you are someone who's juggling 1,000 ideas in your head and hundreds of to do lists, I want you to check out Requisor. We have built Requisor to turn messy ideas into structured plans with milestones and tasks, and also having AI agents that help you execute on them. So check out Requisor. Pasinee, first of all, thank you so much for doing this today. It's always a pleasure to see you. And we've been talking about this for a while. So thank you again for coming onto the podcast, and we are so excited that we have you here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Naveen. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Pasni, tell me how was your day today?
It was great. I mean, we had brunch with us and the live audience we have back here as well joining us. And some brunch mixed in with some Latin music too. So how can you go wrong?
You can't go wrong with that combination, right?
hmm
Now, speaking of a fantastic combination, like that's you. I feel with your business skills as well as your product management skill, and the reason to have you on the podcast was you bring such a different flavor to product management with international product management. So, could you tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be a product manager first, but also in a broader sense, what does a international product manager mean?
Sure, absolutely. So product management in its different forms can be different things between software, physical products. But at the end of the day, what it is, cradle to the grave. You're there to take care of the product from the sourcing, from the testing, from the validating to registering it, and then to sell it to a
Hmm.
consumer, right? So, cradle to grave life cycle of a product line. How international plays into it is then now you have to take your knowledge and that you built up from a domestic foundation and apply it from either the sourcing side or the commercial side to the international communities that you're selling to, right? So, a good example, right? When you know your US basic customers, you
Yeah,
know the product line, you know more or less what the market needs are, the regulatory needs are, et cetera. Everything's the same language, even,
yeah.
right? When you go abroad, all bets are off.
Okay.
And a lot of it's because you can't assume what you know 100% applies internationally because there are local cultures, local politics. There's a whole climate piece, literally and figuratively, that you have to consider when you go internationally because what you think you know in your domestic home base is not the same culture because there's everyone's different. And you have to take a lot of that into considerations.
Mm,
Even small things like taking for granted that we have one currency that we buy product in and we sell product.
right.
When you go international, you may buy in one currency and then you end up selling in another currency. So how does that affect your revenues? How does that affect your, what your plans are for next year and what makes
Yeah,
sense? And it could be like a normal fluctuation of exchange rates, but then let's say something political happens, right? Or maybe that currency suddenly gets defunct.
yeah.
How do you adjust to that plan too? Because it's completely out of your scope and capability, and you can't control how governments or financials work in a different country. So it definitely really elevates a complication when you go international for any
Mm,
product management, but any industry really.
wow. So let me ask you a little bit about that because you gave a great example about the currency fluctuations. So it's you're sourcing a product from one country or a part or a component, and then perhaps manufacturing it and being a part of your product, but then you're selling into another country. Is that the cycle that you kind of mentioned just before?
Yeah, and it's a cycle that all of us do to a certain degree with globalization, right?
Yeah.
We're so interconnected. It's very rare that, what you source and build are all within one country and then you sell within that one country too. Now, everything is the point where, you're probably getting one raw material from one country, getting labor in another country, putting it all together in another country,
Yeah.
and then
Assembly.
shipping it out and sending it to to the final country.
Yeah.
Now, how it complicates it with selling commercially international is that you can be doing all the same things upstream, which is the sourcing, testing, and assembly side. But then now you have so many different countries that you could be selling to internationally.
Yeah.
And, there could be things like, let's say, one country to another country, there was no tariffs or any type of customs issues because they have friendly policies.
Correct. With
That
the
may be
United
run true.
States. Yeah.
Right, and that may be true now, but let's say if I go to a completely different country and there are issues between them, suddenly I have to take into consideration that, okay, well, if I go to a completely different country and there are issues between them, suddenly I have to take into consideration that, okay, well, if I go to a completely different country and there are issues between them, suddenly I have to take into consideration that, okay, well, if I go to a completely different country and there are issues between them, what my what potential documentation do I need
Okay.
now to sell into this new country that's different from selling to the US? What exchange rates are going to play into factor? What are there any potential tariffs or stops because the governments don't like each other for different reasons?
Mm.
So it's you have to think again over and over. I almost think like it's a mini startup every single time you go to a different country because you can have a core product, but you really have to understand the local needs of the market.
Okay, this is complex. So I want and great to hear that there are so many moving parts, because when we think of product management, generally what we speak about is only like software products. You manufacture them, perhaps mostly like with a team that you perhaps work with overseas, but then the consumption is pretty much global as well. But with physical products, I think it maybe even it will be more complicated, because you have logistics involved as well, right? So do you then interface, my question is, do you interface with the legal side, and consultations about like foreign policy and all those things in your theme of product management?
Yeah, that does come to play where you do have to think about, what is the regulatory strategy to get into this new market? What's
Yeah,
the legal issues if there's like an issue between both countries, importing and exporting out of them that wasn't considered before. So it's definitely, like I said, like a mini startup each time you go into a different country
correct,
because what you thought in your costs and overhead for the original country that you've been selling into, let's say hundreds of years, no problem. It varies or it completely changes when you
correct.
map out someplace else. And that's why it is very hard to go international. Like
Yeah.
there's no amazing playbook on it because it's a lot of like you learn and you apply and you
Mm,
make mistakes. That's
right.
how you keep doing it over and over to understand what the market needs truly are, and then that's where the component of having a local team there becomes
Mm,
super helpful too because you can only know so much
correct.
all the way across the pond.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's where it's like reliance on the local teams and reliance on the fact you don't know what you don't know. So
yeah.
willing to learn how do I pivot and adapt.
And work with those contextual aspects of those cultures
Mhm.
and those geographies. No, one of the things even the people who will be watching and hearing this would have is, because we are working with so many different countries, like why do we need to like complicate this? Is it because of profit reasons, or like certain places just have certain raw materials or expertise? Like what has been your experience in the last decade of being international product manager?
Yeah, and it's a mix of both, really, right? So there's certain areas where labor costs are cheaper than where we have in the US.
Yeah,
That's fair. And same thing with Western countries too, where they offsource or go offshore.
yeah.
At the same time, it also makes sense because the natural raw materials are in those areas. Right.
Ah,
So you see a lot of like suppliers and like, for cocoa beans or for cocoa in certain parts of the world
yeah,
and their factories are close to them because the natural resource is there.
correct.
So the
Yeah,
distance is shorter to just bring them there and assemble there and then ship it out versus trying to move that type of product around the world where there's issues where this product can, degrade, right?
yeah.
If it's stayed in a certain state for too long. So
Mm,
it's a mix of both of those. But then that's where a bigger piece of like, okay, now that we are experiencing things like not just political
mm,
or in terms of cultural differences but climate change has a factor as well where it's like okay those cocoa beans which had a yield of however much at this point due to areas being a lot more or there's more deserts in the area or less
yeah.
water there's less output so how do we a plan for that and then b how do we help to maintain that area because now the natural resource is depleting too so it's really just a combination of a few different factors, but also now having to contingency plan. And so, yeah, some of those areas, like even the U.S. with agriculture, you could have, for only a certain period of time, just continue to farm your area, but it gets harder and harder if the resource isn't being replenished, and you'll need a backup, and that could be local or that could be international too.
Okay. No, that makes a ton of sense. So it seems like your role interfaces with a lot of different departments. So if you had to like define, um, I know this is a tricky question, but if you had to define the role of an international product manager, what would that person's uh, task list kind of entail?
Mhm. I feel that most of to be a well-rounded product manager, especially internationally, it's two strong areas. One, your ability to problem solve,
Hmm.
because you're not going to know everything in every country, every part of the world, and things are always changing. So you're just going to have to be able to adapt and problem solve to the situation at hand, and be really building those effective relationships globally and be able to influence. Because a lot of times you have different cultures, different personalities, how one person may assume this is respectful and like a handshake, another part of the world can see that as like, oh, this person is being cold to me, right? So it's
Yeah.
almost like
Hey, all, quick break in the podcast to talk about Requisor. Requisor is a AI project assistant that we have built that takes messy ideas and turns them into action plans with milestones and tasks. We have AI agents that actually help on executing on all of those ideas and action plans as well. These agents can be quoting agents, social media agents, and many more that you can also connect your other apps to. So I want you to check out Requisor and how it can help you to take your ideas to execution. Thank you.
learning some of the markets, but then at the same time, being able to adapt them and hopefully help influencing the conversations. And that's where the role is very pivotal. If you can get well rounded, you can almost like have a superpower where you can help influence conversations that normally the two parties can't talk to each other, not or aren't able to talk to each other because they're coming from different spectrums. So you
Right.
become that mediator of like, what is this part of the world saying and thinking? What is this part of the world saying and thinking? How can we align our objectives together?
So a lot of consensus building,
A lot of that too, right?
negotiations. Yeah.
Right.
And does this was just a curiosity from my end. Does language play a barrier in that? And is that why perhaps I've seen you learn like multiple languages? Is that something as a conscious effort to kind of reach out to your other partners internationally?
Absolutely. I think especially because as a great example with English, English is pretty much very dominant in a lot of
Yeah.
parts of the world where it's almost enforced a lot from like school
Yeah.
and then also into the corporate life where, if you want to be able to work in certain companies in other parts of the world, you have to know English on top. It's almost mandatory.
Yeah.
Where in the flip side, like US or UK, where it's like English is the dominant one, not if you learn an extra language, great, but not a necessity,
Yeah.
right? So what I've seen is that the more you're willing to open up, learn other people's languages and cultures,
Right.
the more they're willing to match up to you and work with you and build that relationship. A good area is Latin America. They're very relationship
Latin
building.
America.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much relationship building. That's a core of their business. And a lot of times, like English isn't taught very um, very much around the area, like very much spread out. It's not always it's very concentrated in certain areas.
Yes.
So
Yes.
with that being said, I have had a lot of clients where even me, sometimes with my not like broken Spanish, but willing to bridge that gap,
Correct.
way more opening and accepting than them trying to speak English because they know it's tougher, but they're
Right.
really appreciating the effort and you to make that certain step to physically meet with them and also be able to talk with them. So I always thought like even if it's like a few words, a hello or a goodbye, but the willingness to match them at their language level, it definitely helps to build that like relationship and shows authenticity in what you're looking for too.
That's a wonderful point that you mentioned because this is not taught in any coursework or any textbook or any of those materials about any discipline, right? Even product management. But it plays such a crucial role in building those relationships that then help you become an effective product manager. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you just dial it back to just English, right?
Yeah.
So much in product management, you're working with different departments,
Hmm.
regulatory, quality, inventory management, and they in their own way have their own language too.
Correct.
They have their own testing standards and they all talk towards their testing standards, or they have inventory management verbiage with like, SOs for stockouts or back orders.
Yeah.
Those are also different languages too. And the more you can understand what they're talking about, the more you can meet in between
Huh.
together. So it's not even just like the actual language needs to be different. It can very well just be speaking the language of what's being said between different parties. Because once they know you have an understanding of what they're saying, it's easier to influence and move things along in the grand life cycle of product development.
Cool. That that makes sense because you're working with so many different personalities in a way, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and would you say like 80% or what percentage of your job, let me ask you this way, is interfacing with people, negotiating? and what percentage of your job is like more technical about the product and the nuances or the features of the product? Would you be able to give us like a rough breakdown of that?
Yeah. So when I was more of an individual contributor, I'd probably say it was more significant on the technical
Yeah.
side of the buildup. And when I was definitely more just US focused in certain areas, as I developed and I became myself a people manager, it became heavier on the influencing,
Okay.
both with my direct report teams above me, people in other countries, very much like influencing and understanding because at that point you're trying to hold teams together to
Right.
get toward the same objective. But if we're all speaking different languages, even if it's all in English, we're all not going to go to the same spot if we don't understand each other. So it's very much heavy on the influencing these days now and talking through problems and problem solving. How do we get to this goal together, guys? How do I make it so it's a win-win for both of us?
Right.
You have certain objectives and goals, as do I. For example, let's say inventory management wants to make sure that the stock levels don't get in surplus for product,
Yeah.
right? That means they're carrying too much inventory and there's not enough space. So they just want to cut down the inventory levels. At the same
Mm,
time, my product line may have a long lead time to get here. And if I want to take on a customer immediately, it's going to be tough if I don't have buffer inventory. So,
mm.
how do we meet the same objective where, hey, I don't want your goals or metrics to be skewed because you can't, now you have to take on more stock. But then we, at the end of the day, our business, we have to sell product and take on customers immediately. So, how do we bring inventory enough that it doesn't hurt your goal, but enough that I can also take on a few new customers and continue the business forward?
Oh, so there's a component of inventory management also in your job.
It's almost, I would say, product manager, the jack of all trades.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to talk and influence on every level and have an understanding at every level. Inventory management for the physical product, forecasting for the sales component, also understanding what the forecasting is for inventory to let your upstream manufacturers know how much they need and to plan for. It's very much you wear a different hat a different day, essentially.
Wow, that's quite a lot of skill sets that are required for one job,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So with that, let me ask you this way, because it's been what, about a decade since you've graduated from college?
Yes.
About, about
Give or take. Are we
give
talking
or
about
take.
undergrad or talking about MBA?
Undergrad.
Give or take. Yes.
Give or take. So if you were to give advice to people who are taking like a product management class right now,
Mhm.
and in general, if they want to break into product management, or they are like an early stage product manager and want to be someone who is advancing their career, what would be some of the advice that you'd like to share, or you wish somebody had given you all those years back?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say you don't know what you don't know. So be willing to learn and continuously learn,
Yeah.
right? Like product manager's always ever growing, ever changing. And you always need to adapt to the situation you're in. But to do that, you kind of have to know and learn and be willing to talk to different people and learn their parties. So in essentially just being a well-rounded product manager versus just, hey, I'm really good at this one marketing campaign, or I'm
Yeah.
really good at sourcing new products. Like
Mm.
it's like, yes, it's great to have certain skill sets of that, but to really be able to get a product through, you need to be able to work and do and have knowledge in every area. You may not be an expert in every single one of them, but you're able to understand it, communicate it, and develop teams around it to move it along. So I guess if I were to sum it up, know what you don't know, but be willing to learn, be willing to learn other people's languages, whether it's English and it's just, a different type of way of talking about like inventory management or technical side with quality. Or if you want to go international, actually learning the language and be open to that. And then just be willing to problem solve and adapt. Those are probably like the key three areas that got me through with product management and really helped make it more successful.
That's amazing. And that's great and like sound advice. So thank you again for sharing your time, sharing your wisdom about product management. I think this is just an introductory conversation that we just had. And I'd love to kind of have you on one more time on the show, and we can deep dive into some of the other aspects of international product management, because I know you have a wealth of experience with you, working in so many different countries. Just out of curiosity, how many countries have you like traveled to and worked for business and sourced and did all the wonderful things from? Can you let our audience know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think that's why I went to international product management because I do love traveling. It's a personal component for me.
You like flying business class.
I mean, that helps. That doesn't hurt at all. Definitely helpful. Um, but yeah, so to date, I've been to about 30 countries.
Wow.
Yes. So very, very happy about that. Eventually I hope to get to the 40 under 40, 40 countries before I hit 40. But we'll just have to see how my travel schedule tracks next year.
Yeah.
And then been to all 7 continents, which I was very happy about that when I finally achieved that through a lot of like time, effort, and like saving
Yeah.
over time. Some of those trips weren't cheap, but like over time and just like over a decade, that
Yeah.
was almost a decade long goal. But very happy about that. And then definitely the 30 countries and going into my 31 one next early next year for work.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. We wish you continued success. I'm a big proponent for your success, and the reason to also have you and we had Palak on the podcast before
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
Philip actually mentioned about you on the podcast too. So we've all gotten you on this podcast at a point where you're rising up in the career. But
Mhm.
as this podcast also kind of goes in time, we hope to see you as a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. We are putting it out there, and hopefully you grant us your interview even then.
Absolutely, and I'm always been proud of how successful you've been, Naveen, how much of a goal getter you are, how much there's no obstacle that you can't take, and just driving it with your own individual persistence too. So I've always admired that, and I think that's a lot of our friendships. Maybe one has been a bit more corporate than the other, but
Yeah.
still same type of ambition. So happy to have our friendship, and of course, anytime you need me, let me know.
All right. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure seeing you, Pasinee, and we'll have you again on the podcast.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.